I still can't believe what happened on moving day. I was trailing behind a moving truck, heading toward our new home in Oakwood Estates, buzzing with excitement after months of paperwork and planning. My wife, Jessica, followed in her car, both of us tired but eager to finally settle in and start this new chapter of our lives. Everything was going smoothly until we turned onto Maple Avenue. That's when my heart dropped. Right in the middle of the road stood a woman in a floral blouse and capri pants, arms crossed, glaring at us as though we trespassed on sacred ground. Behind her sat a lawn chair, placed like she was prepared for a long standoff. The moving truck screeched to a halt. I pulled up alongside it and rolled down my window, ready to ask what on earth was going on. Before I could speak, the woman stormed up to my car with the authority of someone who believed she ruled the entire neighborhood. "You don't have HOA approval to move in today," she declared, her voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. "This street is closed to unauthorized relocations." I blinked, wondering if this was some bizarre neighborhood prank. The driver, Mike, a burly, no-nonsense guy, stepped out and scratched his head. "Ma'am, this is a scheduled delivery. We need to unload today." The woman, who I would soon learn was Karen Peterson, president of the Oakwood Estates HOA, brandished a clipboard like it was a weapon. "I don't see your name on my approved moving schedule," she said smugly. "All new residents must receive clearance before bringing large vehicles into our community." I climbed out of my car, forcing myself to stay calm. Jessica joined me, squeezing my hand tight. This was supposed to be a happy day. We'd spent months saving for this modest fixer-upper, our first home together. The last thing we needed was a self-appointed gatekeeper blocking our way. "I'm Daniel Matthews," I said, extending a hand she ignored. "We closed on 4278 Maple Avenue last week." Nothing in the paperwork mentioned needing permission for moving day. Karen's eyes narrowed. "You're exactly what I was afraid of. Young couples who don't respect our standards." I've been HOA president for 7 years, and I know every bylaw by heart. What I didn't tell her was that I had already read every bylaw front to back. I work as a paralegal. Scrutinizing documents is what I do for a living. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, about requiring HOA permission to move in. The truth was, this wasn't my first run-in with Karen. In the weeks before our move, she had called constantly, demanding we complete forms that didn't exist and threatening us with fines. I had assumed she was bluffing. Clearly, I had underestimated her. "I'll need to see these bylaws you're referring to," I said evenly. We followed every requirement. Karen's face flushed. She jabbed a finger toward an SUV parked sideways across the street, forming another blockade. "That's my vehicle. It's not moving until I see your relocation authorization forms. I've already called an emergency board meeting for next week to discuss your violation." By now, neighbors had started gathering on their lawns. Some filmed with their phones. Others whispered like they were watching a drama unfold. Mike leaned toward me with an apologetic look. "We're on a tight schedule," he murmured. "I've got another job after this. Any chance we can wrap this up quickly?" Jessica, quiet until now, stepped forward and pulled out her phone. "That's it. I'm calling the police." Karen's eyes widened, but instead of backing down, she dropped into her lawn chair and crossed her arms with renewed defiance. "Go ahead. Call them. I have full jurisdiction over this neighborhood, and I won't let you drag down our property values with unauthorized move-ins." While Jessica was on the phone with the police, I decided to approach a few of the neighbors who had gathered to watch. An older man with kind eyes introduced himself as Frank. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Don't take it personally. She pulls stunts like this all the time. Last month, she blocked an Amazon van for 20 minutes because it showed up after 5, claimed it violated some so-called noise ordinance. Another neighbor, out walking her dog, shook her head with exasperation. Karen lives for this kind of power trip. There's no rule about needing permission to move in. My son moved here last year, and all we needed was a standard city permit for the truck, which I can see you already have. As we waited, Karen paraded back and forth in front of her barricade like a sentry on duty. She projected her voice loudly, proclaiming that she was defending the integrity of Oakwood Estates and warning that newcomers like us didn't understand the community's exclusive standards. The way she eyed our modest moving truck, you'd think it personally offended her. I pulled out my phone and began filming, determined to document everything. Karen noticed instantly. "That's against HOA rules," she barked, jabbing her finger at me. "You can't film me without permission." I kept my voice calm. "Actually, we're standing on a public street. There's no expectation of privacy here, especially when you're blocking us from accessing our own home." Her face twisted in fury, but before she could lash out again, a police cruiser pulled up. An officer stepped out, scanning the scene. The moving truck, the SUV angled across the road, and finally Karen, who hastily straightened her blouse and tried to compose herself. "What seems to be the problem here?" the officer asked, walking toward the standoff. Karen launched into her version of events before I could say a word. "Officer, I'm Karen Peterson, president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. These people are attempting to move in without proper authorization. That's a violation of our community's standards. I've asked repeatedly for documentation, and they've refused." The officer turned to me with one eyebrow raised. I calmly presented our closing paperwork. The city issued moving permit displayed on the truck, and even the HOA bylaws I had saved in my phone. I explained that nothing in them required approval to move in. "Do you have documentation of this rule?" the officer asked Karen directly. She faltered, stammering. "Well, it's an unwritten rule. Everyone in the neighborhood understands. As president, I have full jurisdiction over who comes in and when." The officer sighed, clearly used to this sort of thing. "Ma'am, you don't have jurisdiction over public roads. These folks have the proper paperwork. You need to move your vehicle and let them through." Karen's face flushed crimson. "I will not. This is HOA property, and I decide what happens here. If you try to make me move, I'll have your badge number and call your supervisor." The officer's patience thinned. "Ma'am, this road is maintained by the city. Your HOA has no authority to block access. I'll ask one more time. Move your vehicle." Karen crossed her arms defiantly. "Do you know who I am? I'm personal friends with the mayor. I run the community fundraiser every year. You can't tell me what to do on my own street." What happened next was both shocking and, if I'm being honest, a little satisfying. The officer calmly pulled out his handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Karen's mouth dropped open. For once, she was speechless. You can't be serious." "I'm the HOA president." "Being HOA president doesn't put you above the law," the officer replied firmly, turning her around and cuffing her wrists. He read her rights as she stood there, stunned. Around us, neighbors exchanged glances. Some filmed on their phones. Others shook their heads. Not one person stepped forward to defend her. Another officer soon arrived and moved Karen's SUV out of the road. At last, after nearly an hour of chaos, the moving truck rolled forward, finally free to reach our new home. As Karen was escorted to the back of a police cruiser, still shouting about her authority and warning that we would regret this, the tension in the neighborhood seemed to snap like a broken cord. One by one, the neighbors began to approach us. They introduced themselves, offered carry boxes, and even lent us tools. It was as if Karen's grip on the community had lifted the moment those handcuffs clicked shut. "She's been terrorizing us for years," a woman admitted as she helped carry a box of dishes inside. "Last summer, she blocked a landscaping crew because she didn't approve of the flowers the Rodriguez's planted." A retired man named Bill shook his head as he guided the movers into the driveway. "She once called the cops on an ambulance parked in the street while treating Mrs. Wilson's heart attack. Can you believe that?" As the day went on, more stories spilled out. Karen had been wielding her title as HOA president like a weapon, issuing bogus fines, inventing rules on the spot, and threatening lawsuits to intimidate anyone who stood up to her. Most residents had caved simply because it was easier than fighting her. That evening, after we had finally placed the last of our furniture inside, there was a knock at the door. To our surprise, it was Mike, the moving truck driver. flanked by several of our new neighbors. They carried pizzas, bags of chips, and a couple of six-packs. "Figured you could use some food after all that drama," Mike said with a grin. "And I want to make sure you're settling in all right." We gathered in the living room, eating pizza on unopened boxes, and listened as the neighbors filled us in on the aftermath. Karen had been booked on 2 misdemeanor charges, obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct. Though she was quickly released on bail, she faced hefty fines, possibly even jail time, thanks to her tirade against the arresting officer. But the most immediate fallout came from within her own ranks. That very evening, the HOA board had convened an emergency session and voted unanimously to strip Karen of her presidency, effective immediately. When she learned of her removal, a neighbor told us Karen had a complete meltdown inside the police station, screaming that she would sue the entire board, the arresting officers, even the city itself. The same officer who had cuffed her reportedly shook his head and said, "Ma'am, this attitude is exactly why you're here in the first place." According to those who witnessed it, Karen's face in that moment was unforgettable, a volatile mix of shock, rage, and, for the first time in years, genuine fear. Her reign of terror in Oakwood Estates was finally over.